Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to do a little day after analysis after having shot this Davidson Defense AR-47 400 and 500 yards. Okay, it's got the Nightforce 2.5 220 scope on it. I've been testing this out. It's not going to stay on here. It's going to go on a 308 gun. But basically I wanted to see how it was going to work out for me. Okay, so I've done a lot of videos on this AR-47. It has hit 1 MOA groups at both 100 yards and 200 yards with Red Army standard. Okay, so it shoots the cheap stuff pretty good. Only issue I have had was the original Bear Creek Arsenal firing pin broke on me first at 250 rounds, and then the replacement broke at 10 rounds. Okay, but I've got that replaced with a Black Rifle Arms firing pin, which seems to be working pretty good. So what I want to do is I want to first show you guys how we did at 400 and 500 yards. The reason why we are indoors today is because it is very windy outside, so I needed to use the board and I needed to hold up this big paper for you guys. And when I tried doing the video outside in front of the gun range, the paper was just blowing all over the place. So that wasn't going to work. So let me hold this thing up here for you guys, for you to see. All right, so I shot the 400 yards. Those are the holes with the circles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, at the 400 yards, and the 5 out of 5 came in at 14 inches, right? And then usually I'll take the best 4 out of 5, right? So that would be 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? This group right here, okay? And that came in at 9 inches, okay? So we have 5 out of 5 for 3.5 MOA, and then we got 4 out of 5 for 2.25 MOA, right? 2.25 MOA. I'll include some video at the end of the video of this video where I'm actually shooting it. I'm shooting prone off the bipod, off this bipod right over here, the CV Life bipod. I like it because it's quick attach. I did not have a bag in the back, right? So I'm holding the stock in my chest. If I had a bag, I think this group would have been a lot better. But basically, I had when I went, because now I'm walking back and forth over these distances over 400 and 500 yards with the, basically I'm holding the tripod, the ground's uneven, the snow had melted, so the ground was really mushy. So I didn't want to also have to try and take a bag out there. So that's one of the practicalities of shooting distance. A lot of times you're not going to be able to bag the back of the rifle. You're just going to be shooting off of the bipod on uneven ground. Okay, so that's what I was able to do with that. Now, then I shot the 500 yards. So the 500 yards is the holes here without the circles. Okay, so this is at 500 yards. So I only managed to get 4 out of the 5 on the paper. Okay, so we got 1, 2, 3. And the 4th one went out here, all the way out here, okay? So the 5th one probably blew over here. I mean, there was like gusts of wind on and off. So I managed to get 4 out of 5 on the paper at 500 yards for 13.25 inches from there to there, right? 13.25 inches for a 2.6 MOA, 2.6. Really curious, actually, for a second. Let me just take a look at the 3 shots. Hold on, I got a tape measure right here. Let me go get a tape measure. All right, I got tape measure. Just out of curiosity, I wanted to see at 500 yards what these 3 shots were over here. So those 3 shots are 6 inches, right, with a 7.62 by 3.9 Red Army standard. So that works out to like 1.2 MOA on the 3 shots. However, I normally don't look at 3 out of 5 because I think that's kind of like, being cheesy and gaming it. I normally look at the 4 out of 5. So the 4 out of 5. We said it was a 13.25 for 2.6 MOA. I think that's pretty damn good, all right? Pretty damn good for basically what used to be very cheap ammunition, right? 7.62 by 3.9 steel case, Red Army standard. Really great for those of us that have stockpiled this stuff over many years and have thousands of rounds. If you don't already have it, I'm probably going to say, you know what, unless 7.62x3.9 becomes really cheap, right? Don't bother with it. Just stick to 5.56. Okay. So, but anyway, let's look at some interesting numbers here. Let me put this paper down. Let me bring the camera a little bit closer. All right. So, some interesting data here. So this is the Red Army standard, 122 grains. I ran it through my chronograph, right? So I knew that I had a speed of 2,225 feet per second, right? 25 feet per second. That's what I was using. I also have Tula. The Tula is a little bit faster. It's a little bit more powerful. The Tula is like 2250. But anyway, I had lots of Red Army standards, so that's what I was using. So first, let's talk about the zero that I had, right? Because we're going to talk about the energy. We're also going to talk about the holdovers that I used to make my hits. Okay, so basically, my zero is about at 50 yards is plus 1 inch. Okay, I'm 1 inch high at 50 yards. At 100 yards, I'm about 4 inches high. And at 200 yards, I'm 1 inch high, okay? So this zero started off as a 50-yard zero. But what happened is, like, I think I was impacting a little bit too low at 200 yards. So when I got up to 200 yards, basically I adjusted it up so that I was either, so I had a second zero at 200 yards. I ended up basically 1 inch high, but that can change because a lot of times when you're holding, I mean, if you're, when you're looking through the scope, I mean, if you're like an eighth of an inch high or an eighth of an inch low, that's going to move you, at 200 yards, it's going to move you up or down an inch, okay? So just the last time I shot it, my shots came in 1 inch high at 200 yards, which I was fine with. So then I went back and I looked, okay, at 100 yards, I'm hitting 4 inches high, which is fine because basically if you put the dot here, you'll be 4 inches high, 4 inches low. So that works out fine. And then at 50 yards, I'm 1 inch high. That works out fine. Okay, so that's what I'm getting. Let's look at these energy numbers here. Okay, so with this Red Army standard at the muzzle, our energy is 1341 at 50 yards, 1221 at 100 yards, 1110. Okay, so all this is above 1,000 foot-pounds. Okay, now once we get to 200 yards, we drop below 1,000 pounds, 1,000 foot-pounds of energy. So at 200 yards, we got 911. 300 yards, 739, 400 yards, we got 592, 500 yards, 467. Okay, so at 500 yards, 467, we're still like 40 caliber, right? Yeah, I mean, we've definitely have dropped down into, pistol power, but, basically it's like a 40 cal. Okay, that's the energy, pretty close to the energy of a 40 cal. Okay, now by comparison, right, just for the sake of comparison, I also I looked up my energy numbers for the 62 grain green tips 5.56. At 500 yards, the energy is 464. Okay, so the energy of the 7.62x3.9 and the green tip at 500 yards, right? It pretty much ends up being very close. Now the 7.62x3.9 starts off with more energy, but because it's a fatter bullet, the wind is slowing it down a little bit more. So by the time it gets to 500 yards, it's basically equal to the green tip. Now, I did do a test, and I posted a video where I was shooting a truck rim at 200 yards with the 7.62x3.9 and the green tip. Okay, the 7.62x3.9, right, out of the 16-inch barrel, could not penetrate the truck rim. Okay, you guys, if you haven't seen that video, look it up. But the 62 grain green tip, not only is it able to penetrate it with a 16-inch barrel, the green tip is also able to penetrate it out of an 11.5-inch barrel. Okay, so the green tip really gives the bullets a whole different dynamic. Now, unfortunately, we cannot get like cheap 7.62x3.9 green tips. Okay. So since that's not available, like I said earlier in the video, unless you already have stockpiles of 7.62x3.9, I would stick with 5.56. Okay, you know it's a lot cheaper, more economical, and the bullets, right, especially with green tips, are going to have more penetrating power. Okay, so yeah, this is meant to be just a fair comparison, you know, or an impartial comparison. This is what the numbers are. This is what I did. This is the accuracy that I got. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit. So this is the power. Okay, I want to talk about the holdovers. Okay, what did it take to get my hits out at 400 and 500 yards? So as I showed you guys earlier, I had this Nightforce scope. Now this is an MOA scope. I prefer mil scopes, but this one over here happens to be an MOA scope, and it's no difference. Like talking about centimeters versus inches or miles versus kilometers, the same thing. I mean, you can convert back and forth between the two numbers with a conversion number of like 3.5. Okay, you can multiply and divide. So for, you know, we're not going to talk about holdovers out to 200 yards, because with either 5.56 or 7.62 by 3.9, okay, I basically zero the rifle, so I'm getting an impact at 200 yards. So with either one, 5.56 or 7.62 by 3.9 or 308, it's pretty much point of aim, point of impact out to 200 yards. So it's what happens after 300 yards, right? Or after 200 yards, what happens at 300 yards to 500 yards, that is interesting here, okay? So in order for me to get my my hits at 300 yards, what I had to do is, right, I had to dial up 6 MOA on that scope over there, okay? Now, if that was a mil scope, it would have been a dial up or a holdover of 2 mils, okay? At 400 yards, in order for me to get my hits, I had to dial up 11 MOA, okay? If that was a mil scope, I would have dialed up 3 mils, okay? And at 500 yards, in order to get my hits, I had to dial up 18 MOA, okay? If that was a mil scope, I would have dialed up 5, okay? So either MOA or mils doesn't make a difference, as long as you know what you got to dial up. It makes no difference, okay? The only real difference is if I'm with somebody else that's also shooting or spotting for me, we both got to make sure that we're talking the same language, okay? So if they're spotting for me, you know, if I'm using MOA, they also have to be using MOA. If I'm using mils, they also have to be using mils. Okay, so you gotta be talking the same language. Now, there was a little bit of a wind that day when I shot this, but the wind was mostly coming from behind me, so it didn't have too much of an effect. But what's interesting to look here, like, all right, 7.62 by 3.9. You know, what is the effect of the wind? Okay, so now this is off of the ballistic calculator. At 500 yards, if I have a direct value 10 mile per hour wind, okay, so if it's coming in like, you know, at a 90-degree angle, right, basically to my side, full value wind to the side, okay, I would, for 10 miles per hour with the 7.62 by 3.9, I would have to hold 7 MOA, okay, versus with the green tip, right, with the 5.56 green tip, the hold would be 5 MOA, okay? So because the 62 grain 5.56 is going faster, the wind has less time to work on it, right? So the wind hold is less, okay? So basically it's I would only have to hold 5 MOA for a 10 mile per hour wind. Now if it was in mils, right, for a 7.62 by 3.9, the hold would be 2 mils, right, for the 7.62 by 3.9, and it would be 1 mil for the 62 grain 5.56. Okay. Now, the thing with the wind holds is like I've shot when like there's almost no wind, but in fact there's a little bit of wind, because just because there's no wind at your position, it doesn't mean that there's no wind in the middle, downrange. A lot of times I'm shooting like kind of from hill to hill, so like I'll have a situation where there's like no wind where I'm shooting at. It might be because I'm surrounded by trees, no wind where the target is, but there's wind in the valley in between, or the opposite, right? There's no wind in between, but then there's wind where I'm shooting from, and there's wind at the target area. So it's really hard to predict with the wind. If you got a lot of wind, what I found is the best way to try to get on target is to have somebody spot for you, or if you're shooting against the type of background where you can see your impacts, basically self-correct based on the impacts. Now, when I was shooting this, right, when I was shooting the 400 and 500 yards, there was no, I mean, basically the background was such that I couldn't see bullet impacts. Okay, so basically the significance of that is I started my shooting with a certain amount of information, right? This information that I had here, and I had to, that's all that I had, right? I couldn't like spot my impacts and correct. If I didn't go in with the right information, I wasn't going to make my hits at 400 and 500 yards. Okay. Now the other interesting thing that came out of this shooting, again, I was using this 2.5 to 20. Actually, back you guys up. Okay, so the other interesting thing that came out of this shooting is I was using this Nightforce 2.5 to 20 scope. So first thing that came up is I had a problem with these caps, right? Because these caps, they're these rotating caps, and what happens is sometimes when you pop them open, like even if you pop it open, like you'll pop it open like this at the top, but then it'll rotate around, and sometimes it'll end up in this position here like this. And you're looking through your scope, because normally when you pop your caps, you're not looking at it, you're just behind the scope and you pop it, and you'll end up in the position like this, and you're like, okay, why can't I see anything? And it's because your caps ended up in this position. So one of the things that came out of this shooting exercise was I do not like caps that do this shit. Okay, so yeah, that's one of the things that came out of it. Now on the same day that I was shooting this, I was also shooting a 5.56 gun. I'll cover that in a different video. Now that had the Holosun 503G ACSS, right? So it had a red dot with a bullet drop compensator in it, and I had a 6x vortex magnifier behind it. Okay, so with this scope here, right, even though I had more magnification, when I got into position, basically you gotta zoom, you gotta start off zoomed down, okay, in the 2.5. You gotta find, so and anytime you adjust your magnification, you also have to adjust the parallax on this, otherwise it's like way off. So I have to get on target, then zoom up, and then adjust the parallax. So it's like a two-step process: adjust magnification, adjust parallax, and then take your shot. Okay. So when I was shooting the red dot with the magnifier, right, what I was doing is, okay, flip the magnifier off, use the red dot to get on target, just flip the magnifier back on, and that's it. You're ready to shoot. You're not sitting there really, playing with dials, adjusting here, adjusting here. The other thing is, with this scope, I had to dial up, right? So the thing with the MOA scope, okay, and part of the reason why I like mils, not MOAs, you can see that there's a lot of numbers there, right? There's a lot of numbers there. So with this, I'm like, okay, I need 11 mils. So you're like, click, 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 11. Okay, if I'm at 15, I'm like, okay, if I'm at 500 yards, okay, I gotta get to 18 now, and I'm looking here. With the mil scope, okay, there's just less numbers, right? It's either 2, 3, or 5, and that's it, right? Very simple numbers. With the red dot with the bullet drop compensator, that was even easier. Okay, so practically speaking, right, for shooting out to 500 yards, scope versus or dial-up scope like this versus the red dot with the bullet drop. When I was shooting that, it's like, okay, I'm at 300 yards. Okay, that's basically the legs of my chevron, right? The bottom leg. I'm at 400 yards. That's the first dot. Okay, I'm at 500 yards. That's the second dot. Okay, so I was able to actually get my shots off a lot faster. I'm not playing with parallax. I'm not dialing. I'm not switching magnification back and forth. So and I was able to get very effective hits out to 500 yards here. Let me show you guys, like real quick. This is with the 11.5 inch. I actually got really similar results. Okay, so this is with I was using Wolf Gold 223. So again, budget ammo. So at the where are you? Actually, this is just 500 yards. This is just 500 yards. So at the 500 yards, I did 2 groups. The first one was 1, 2, 3, 4 hits. Where's the fifth one? I thought there was a fifth one there. Where's the fifth one? Oh, down here. Okay. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hits, right? For a total of 17 inches. So that's pretty close to what I got before, right? And then the 4 out of 5 is 13 inches, okay? So 3 and 3.4 MOA, and then on the 4 out of 5 was 2.6 MOA. And then the second group I shot, I only managed to get 4 out of 5 on the target. 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? So the 4 out of 5 was 14 inches for 2.8 MOA. And then I got 3 shots came in real nice. It's funny, like again, I got 3 shots here, really tight, just like I did with the 7.62 by 3.9. That's a total, the 3 shots are 8 inches. Again, that's at 500 yards, okay? So with both the 7.62 by 3.9 and the 5.56, okay, I was able to get to 500 yards. I was able to, the groups came in about the same, right? I mean, everything's coming in like 2.5 to 3 MOA, or somewhere between 2.5 and 3.5 MOA. Let's say 3 MOA, right? Again, this is shooting prone without a bag in the back, just in the shoulder. So accuracy is coming in about the same. The only difference is with the 7.62 by 3.9, I just got to dial up more. Now, if you know what your dial up is, or if you know what your holdover is, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. Like, what does it matter? Like, if I'm clicking up 2 or I'm clicking up 5, right? Or it doesn't make a difference, because if this was like over here, let's go to mils for a second, right? With the 7.62 by 3.9, right? At 300 yards, I got 2 mils. At 400 yards, at 300 yards it's 2 mils. At 400 yards it's 3 mils, and at 500 yards it's 5 mils. Okay. If this was 5.56, okay, the numbers would be at 300 yards, I got 1 mil. At 400 yards, I got 2 mils. And at 500 yards, I got 3 mils. Okay, so who cares? I mean, as long as you know what your numbers are, it makes no difference whether you're shooting 7.62 by 9 or 5.56. The only real difference is, do you have 7.62 by 3.9 stockpiled? If you don't, go to ammoseek.com, because that's where I've seen the best prices. That's like a search engine that helps you find the best prices. So, and the last time I did it, it seemed like I was able to still get it for like $10 a box of 20, maybe $12 for a box of 20 rounds. So the price, you can still get good prices. There's still stuff out there. But the real thing is, as far as difference between 5.56 and 7.62 by 3.9, is when you start using green tips. That's a difference, man. And that's something that, like, we pretty much discovered at the 200 yards shooting the steel rim. And I have to assume that, like, obviously, I don't think I would get penetration on the truck rim with the green tips, right, at 500 yards. But you're going to get better penetration. It's just a harder bullet, right? So you are going to get better penetration. Now, as far as shooting at 500 yards, what's the practical use of it? So with neither 5.56 or 7.62 by 3.9, you're not going to go hunting like a big animal, right? You're not going to take down a buffalo or something. Okay, that would be a terrible thing to do, because you're not going to kill the animal. You're just going to hurt it. Okay, so you want to do that at 500 yards. This is basically this is for combat or SHTF or that type of a situation. So inside of 200 yards, or even inside of 100 yards, the bullet has to stop the threat, right? It has to incapacitate, because if you wound somebody, especially inside of 100 yards, they're probably going to calculate their best chance of survival is to continue to charge forward and defeat you, right? Because if they turn around and try to run away, you're going to shoot them in the back, right? That's what they might calculate. However, at like 200 yards and out, okay, if you wound somebody, right? So let's say you hit somebody at 500 yards, first of all, 450 foot-pounds is, if you hit him anywhere on the chest, I mean, that's lethal. But if let's say you wound them, right? Let's say you hit him in the arm or the leg, and you just wound somebody at 500 yards, they're not going to continue to charge forward against 500 yards, okay? Because when I was shooting this, I was walking through some marshy land. It was uphill, downhill, And man, it was pretty exhausting. Okay, so you're not gonna. Nobody who's wounded is going to charge forward across 500 yards to try and take your position. If they're wounded, they're going to turn around and get out of there. Okay, so wounding somebody, even if it's like, even if the power on this was half of this, even if it was like a 22, right? Let's say it was 100 foot-pounds of energy at 500 yards. All right. If you wound them at that distance, they're going to get out of it. They're not going to continue to charge forward. So wounding somebody at distance is very effective. Okay. So anyway, here's some data for you guys to think about. Let me know what you guys think. And oh, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned the velocity on those 62 grain green tips, 2896 feet per second. Okay. In case you wanted to plug this stuff into a calculator and see what you get. Okay, so drop some comments. Let me know what you guys think. I'll talk to y'all soon. Hey everyone, one more thing I wanted to mention with regards to dialing up. Okay, if you're used to using holdovers, right, or using a bullet drop compensator, what's going to happen is you're going to forget to dial this. Okay, so when I got to the location, basically I wanted to get a couple of warm-up shots at 300 yards. And, basically I got behind the scope and, put the reticle on target and, I forgot to dial up. Okay. So I was hitting way low at 300 yards. So my thoughts are that if this is the type of scope that you want to work with, I mean, you probably shouldn't go back and forth between using scopes that you dial up on and scopes that you hold over on. Okay. With most of my scopes, right? I use holdovers, right? So either my red dots that have the bullet drop compensators, like the Holosun 503G ACSS, or my LPVOs, where basically I'm holding on the reticle, right? It's got either a bullet drop or it's got like mill lines or something that I can hold on, and I'm not like automatically down. Because the other thing that a lot of times happens is like you dial up, but then you forget to dial down. So the next time you go to take a shot, like let's say it's at 30 yards or 50 yards, you're way high because you didn't zero out your scope. Okay, so that's one of the things that's going to happen if you're going back and forth between dial-up scopes and scopes that you hold a reticle on. So in general, if I'm going to be shooting 600 yards and in, I prefer a scope that I'm just holding on the reticle. Okay, if I'm going to be shooting 500 yards plus, like 500 yards to 1,000, right? Like my 308 guns, particularly my 20-inch 308 gun. Yeah, that's a scope I'll have the dial up on, and you kind of need it because here's the thing: if you have a scope that goes, up to like 20 magnification plus 20, my 308 has a 5 to 25. As you zoom in on the reticle, right, you lose your field of vision, right? So when you go down the reticle, right, the lowest that you can actually see is 6 mils. Let's say on that particular scope. So you have to dial up because you're not able to see low enough once you zoom in on the reticle. Okay, so that's why if on pretty much all of my SHTF guns and all of my, guns that are for shooting, 600 yards and in, I just want to hold on the reticle, okay? On the few scopes that I have, or few guns I have set up specifically for shooting 1,000 yards, okay? Yeah, on that, you're going to need a dial-up. But the idea there is that if you're taking a 1,000-yard shot, you got a lot of time to set up, to look at it. You're not necessarily going to be rushing that shot. Okay, so you're having to adjusting your magnification, adjusting your parallax, adjusting your dials on top, right? It's I mean, you have the time to do it, right? Whereas 500, 600 yards and in, you're not going to have as much time. I mean, that's how that would, I think, play out. Okay.